said 8 minutes. I think I allowed 10, so you got away with an extra 2 minutes. Right, we begin now on item 9, which is reports of the Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Public Protection. TIG, it's the proposed creation of a new combined fire authority for Hampshire.
Thank you, Chair. I refer to paper C regarding the proposal for the combined fire authority for the Isle of Wight, Hampshire, Portsmouth and Southampton, with a recommendation that this council notes the outcomes of the consultation exercise with regards to the proposed CFA, and second, that we recommend to the Cabinet that we agree to proceed with the submission of the proposal to the Secretary of State for the creation of a new combined fire authority covering the 2 counties and 2 city council authorities previously stated. The process has been a fairly long one. Members will recall that the Chamber considered the matter of the consultation whilst running alongside the drafting of the full business case. I believe the Chamber rightly delayed the consultation so that the full business case could be presented to the public for the consultation process. That consultation was drafted in accordance with the Consultation Institute and was free from biased language. It was presented over a 12-week period in an appropriate fashion, and the responses have been considered. I recognise the majority of the members of the public from the island who gave their responses were against the proposal for the combined fire authority. We do take those responses seriously, but it's worth noting and considering the evidence from previous consultations that the lack of responses from the general public does tell its own story. I believe we had 48 members of the Isle of Wight community give their responses. That's 0.041% of the population. We saw tonight how proposals which are considered perhaps potentially controversial can see a huge response from thousands of members of the local community. I think those numbers do tell a story about this proposal being a sensible one. People on the Isle of Wight are very committed to and supportive of the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. Their key concern is the protection of frontline services. Indeed, the negative responses from the few members of the public who did partake were mostly predicated around the belief that the combined authority would see a reduction in frontline services for the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. I would say to the Chamber that if that were the case, we'd know about it. There would be a great many members of the service fighting against this policy, and yet 80% of the responses from employees from the island to the consultation were positive about the new combined authority. Indeed, we've received written support from the FBU, the FRSA, the FOA, Unison and the GMB supporting this proposal. The proposal is clearly about the governance of the fire authority, not operational issues. I believe the proposed new authority, if accepted, will deliver improvements across all areas. Each service would benefit from increased shared learning and use of existing resources. Hampshire, for example, would benefit from the experience of the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service in running an effective road safety programme and partnership working. And the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service would benefit from the extensive support structures that are currently in place in Hampshire. For example, the current Hampshire Authority set aside £250,000 for mental health support. It provides traumatic incident management plans for staff within 72 hours of a traumatic incident. Indeed, that Her Majesty's inspection report just before Christmas highlighted the need for that support. Combination would also see collective approaches, systems and processes and procedures, including for firefighters at actual fires. As we consider the proposal for the new combined authority, we must decide what alternative is available to us if we vote against the proposal. We are currently 3 years into a 5-year partnership with Hampshire known as DDIP, or Delivering Differently in Partnership. On the whole, that partnership has worked well, but if we were to choose not to proceed with the CFA, we must consider negotiating a new partnership, which is currently indeterminate length, or we must decide to turn the clock back to the days when the service was wholly run on the Isle of Wight, including senior management, provided locally and accept the impact that that would potentially have on frontline services. So I believe the proposal sets out a path that will ensure the long-term resilience of the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. It will protect frontline services and deliver continued improvements in service delivery and protect our island community. I therefore recommend that this chamber note the results of the consultation and recommend the Cabinet to agree to proceed with the submission of the proposal to the Secretary of State for creation of a new combined authority. And I would ask for a seconder for that proposal.
Is there anyone wishing to speak? Councillor Ian Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. I liked option 3, was it? Which has been excluded from the recommendation. What I would say is that with regard to our fire fighters and indeed the fire authority for this island, we have it here. We have representatives that are local, that know the issues, know the risks, and are locally accountable. This is what is held nationally as being one of the criteria, which is local accountability. Looking at the ways that the combined authority might well be set up, we have to look at the situation with regard to the membership of a new combined Hampshire, Southampton, Portsmouth and Southampton and Isle of Wight Fire Authority. We have to look at the representation and the voice on that committee or authority. I've seen the way that our policing amalgamation has gone with Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and I dare say members of the public have. And I would like to think that turn the clock back, things were hellishly different for local policing and coverage on the Isle of Wight. What I would say is that fire authorities throughout England, and indeed throughout the UK, since Grenfell, have had to take a long, hard look at themselves, and HMI CFRS have brought out their inspection regime, which we fared fairly well with, along with Hampshire. You can put a, if you'll excuse the analogy, a cigarette paper between us. So we're not there to gain from performance-wise from them. We do have areas where we work in collaboration with them, and that would continue. That would continue. I dare say that elsewhere people would take note of if things fell by the wayside and we weren't pushed towards an amalgamation with our hand up our back to say this is the way that we've got to go. I think that, as I mentioned just now, local political representation, local responsibility and local knowledge is the way forward. Broadening the role of firefighters into protection and fire safety is on the agenda as well. So I just want to, I realise the buzzer's gone, but I do want to say that we can do this, and we can do this if we need more money. Then why are we putting the fire services over to Hampshire for their governance when we haven't even been tested for our governance on the Isle of Wight, and Hampshire haven't as yet? That's coming up in the near future.
Okay, moving on, please, Councillor Redgeberry.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to number or name all the services that we've, since 2005, that we've given away or had taken from us even. And there's so many of them, I wouldn't try to name them all because I'm sure there was some that I forgot. This is supposed to be a unitary council, and gradually we're heading towards being a borough. I can understand why of the three other fire services want to take the Isle of Wight Fire Service over, because it's by far the better service. There's nothing wrong with our fire service. It's a perfectly good service that's been serving the Isle of Wight community for a good number of years. Over 100 years at least. My father was in the fire service and he... Sorry, what was that, Mush? Can I finish, Chairman, or am I going to get any more of that? So, and that was all run by local people, right? What we're seeing tonight is the first step down the road of a combined fire and police authority, where the precept will be charged on the ratepayer to pay for it. Before long, the people of the Isle of Wight will be put up with a commissioner, and have one commissioner like the police force got now, and the leader knows as well as anyone here what it's like trying to have any say in the running of the police authority. You'll be precepted from the mainland, and the people, residents in my ward in Nettleston, will be paying the same for the fire and police as what somebody in the middle of Southampton be paying. That's the road we're going down. It's been decided, it's all sorted out, it's been done a long time ago. But I'm asking you here tonight, don't be led like a lot of sheep into that, because that's what's going to happen. We've got our fire service and we've still got a unitary council. Let's keep it that way.
Councillor John Nicholson.
Well, it's lovely to look at things through rose-tinted spectacles, all this nostalgia of how things used to be. But and it's fantastic that we promote the Isle of Wight and our resources and our abilities. But we have to have a sense of realism. When you look at what's happened to our ambulance service through combining with the mainland, it's vastly improved. When you look at the CCG, the Clinical Commissioning Group, who my committee passed a vote of no confidence on not a year ago, and you look at the transformation that is happening through drawing on mainland resources, members will not forget the state that our children's services were in, some of the worst in the country, and it's only through combining with far bigger and greater resources from the mainland that we've managed to turn that round to be one of the best in the country now. So I think with the fire service we have to recognise the report, we have to be realistic about it. We're not living in the past, we're living in a modern technical age, and we should be embracing what this report recommends.
Councillor Lilly.
I accept some of the things you've said, Councillor Nicholson, but I would like to look at it from another basis. We are an island, and the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands and Shetland and others are able to run one public realm, which I support, is that we should run our services as an island within that, because we do have the threat of losing our identity and our skills. And it's important to note that the HMI Inspector's report, recently just come out, actually showed that we were very effective. In fact, our report was better than Hampshire's, and we only had 58 actual firefighters, but we were actually hitting targets better. The only problem that it actually said in that report really was the bullying between managers and that, between the island and Hampshire. So it's important to sort of note that actually our fire crews were actually delivering. It's also important to note that in the consultation, the island was the one place in all the areas that actually 75% of the respondents, yes, it was small, it wasn't a very good consultation, but majority of people who did respond responded against this, and actually the 9 parish town councils that were consulted actually were against. There was only one chail which actually was for this. So we've got to actually listen to people, and we should be going for one public realm, actually having our own parliament in this thing as an island, autonomous island, with a thing the same as the Isle of Man and the Jersey and other islands. We're an island. We do not fit in with mainland services.
Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. First, as Chair of Scrutiny, I should just sort of make the points that were made then and indeed in June last year, which are the importance in if this is a move to happen, that in transferring the governance to a combined fire authority, that there should be strong arrangements for scrutiny that are in accordance with the Fire and Rescue National Framework for England. And I believe that has been heard, but I felt it necessary as Chair of Scrutiny to iterate that again. I am not afraid of combined fire authorities. I have served on two. Once when I was a councillor in Southampton and once when I was a councillor in Bournemouth. So I am not afraid of them. They do good work. They can deliver the job well. What I'm afraid of is the message that if this council goes forwards, having had its arm really nastily pushed up its back, really, that if we don't go down this route, it will happen to us anyway, is that the good work that is being done to establish with government that the island is different and has different needs and different funding requirements will be undone somewhat by this continual ceding of government of the island to other places, albeit in partnership. Partnerships are good, and there are plenty of examples of that throughout this council's work, and we heard of that earlier around children's services. My criticism of the business case remains the same as my criticism of it June 2018. It is full of warm words, but you actually look for the evidence. It is really rather light. A lot of it is down to inference. Something about big organisations are better is the best way of paraphrasing that. But there aren't the academic references. There aren't the numbers that one can get into. It's almost a wing and a prayer and a hope that somehow this would be better. My view is that we should not go down this route. We should continue the good work that is going on with government to understand our needs as an island. And whilst I wouldn't necessarily go as far as Councillor Lilly in demanding full autonomy or even independence, the recognition that the island might be better off bringing its services back closer to home and delivering that one public service as one island without any restrictions linking it across the Solent would be a better move forward. So it is a strategic view that I have on this. I can see the operational reasons why others across the chamber may want to go down in the other way. I say steel yourself and say to yourself, actually, you know what, I'm here to represent the island rather than just to acquiesce to a threat that has been made to me.
Councillor Abrahams.
Thank you, Chairman. As members might know, I was in Tig's position for almost 7 years on this authority. And when I became the Cabinet member in 2005, the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service was in special measures. It was in deep, deep trouble. We had, I think I was called to government offices on 4 or 5 different times to meet the fire ministers, to encourage us to merge with Hampshire. Now, I never thought that I would ever come to the conclusion that I have tonight. The fire service has fought long and hard to stay independent. The last authority made a big change when it merged its chief fire officer with Hampshire, and that was done for no other reason than savings, because you have a set pay scale for chief fire officers, and they are mightily expensive people to employ. Prior to 2005, we actually did employ a director, or chief fire officer, who was also a director of the council. It was a merged post. After that, the council decided, and it was Reggie's group, I believe, at the time, decided to go down the route of having a chief fire officer, and it went downhill. I'm really surprised at how little feedback there has actually been on this consultation. And I think that is primarily because the FBU actually see the benefits of this. I was really surprised because I told my cabinet colleagues, you will get a lot of flack over this. The FBU will be very much at the front of a campaign to try and retain it. But they have now actually seen, I believe, the benefits of the way that this proposal goes tonight. And I am reluctant to support it, I have to say. I'm a born and bred islander. My family have lived on for generations. I had 2 uncles who served during the war in the fire service when it was the National Fire Service. But I think we have to be realistic. This is a very, very small service. And as long as we can, what I would like to hope that the new combined service will remain the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. The other thing that I would hope that fire service will still badge our island fire and rescue service vehicles and tenders as the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. That is all I would ask. Other than the emotion.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. I was around in the era that Councillor Abraham has just told us about. And in those days, the big worry was moving the control centre to the mainland, and it was going to go to Surrey. And I think there was a working party of councillors, I think anyway, but we went and looked at the Isle of Wight control centre, and there were 2 dear ladies there with their computer and a kettle and a telephone, fine, and a map of the island, and fine. We then went to Surrey to have a look at their control centre, and it was like moving to the Starship Enterprise in comparison. There were electronic maps. It was just out of this world to anything that we could afford, okay? They could communicate directly with every fire appliance, not just a control centre, every single fire appliance. We could put fire appliances anywhere we wanted on the island, and they would be tasked directly from Surrey. And those people knew the island probably just as well as we did. But I say, there was lots of concern about it, but it happened. And it moved our fire service on leaps and bounds, because we were now able to take advantage of this technological advance. Now, that agreement was for a limited period, which I believe has now come to an end, and even Surrey was better than Hampshire at the time, and that's why we went to Surrey. But Hampshire is obviously caught up with that. Now, I think if we think to ourselves, oh, well, let's bring it all back to the island, actually, we couldn't even afford that sort of setup. We couldn't produce the fine service that we have. And it's because of this technological advance. No matter how good our staff are, it's how quickly they get the message, how quickly they get to the incident, so on and so forth. So I am going to support this, because if we don't, I think the service will degrade. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. I've written down the phrase "moving with the times" because that's what I was thinking when Councillor Stevens was speaking. And let's not remember, this is the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Authority, which I think is a good thing. Michael, you scared me actually, because I was thinking on your scenario, I would be Prime Minister. That's a bad news thought itself. And Mr. Metcalfe will be head of the civil service, which brings itself a bit of a worry. So maybe we don't want to go back to a parliament on the Isle of Wight. I don't know. Councillor Garrett raised some valuable points. I'll just point out at paragraph 51 of the paper, you'll see the legal bit that talks about the factual position under the Police and Crime Act for the Police and Crime Commissioner. And some police and crime commissioners, and Kent is the lead, have taken over the fire service, and they can do that at any time. I'm pleased because I have this other hat with the police and crime panel that I'm very aware that Michael Lane is not of that mind at the moment, because he too is comfortable with the progress of this approach. And I look at it in the broad terms. I can remember the previous administration, I think it was the deputy leader standing on the hill somewhere, we were saying we're going to close the Isle of Wight down basically, and we're all going off to the mainland. Well, a few years on, we're still here. We've got excellent children's services working in partnership. We've got excellent public health. We've got excellent fire service working in partnership, because this isn't new. We've been there for some while. The police service, although it's Hampshire, in fact, is been serving us well. So, and as we move now to work with other local authorities, right or wrongly, our Section 151 officer, that's the finance person, is from Portsmouth and does us a good job. So when you look around, it's about choosing the right partners and working together well. I think this is the right way to go. I like it because actually we maintain the standards that we've got. And I will close by saying I am really impressed with the amount of energy and commitment that Tig has put into all his work with the fire reviews and the subsequent paper. That's 3 cabinet members I'm lucky to have, and that excludes Stuart, who's still with us, which is good. So, yeah. So I'm very happy to support this. I think we've got to look forward. We're very aware of the concerns, and I note the point that Scrutiny made, because I'm going to take that one on. But I would encourage everybody to support this and show everybody else this island wants to be at the front end of this kind of thing. Thank you.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chair. In words I never thought I would say this evening, I did agree with one point that Councillor Garrett made. We're here to represent the island and its representatives, and their safety must come first. I believe it would be reckless and irresponsible if we did not take this opportunity to make sure that our fire service is fit for purpose and sustainable into the future. It's interesting that there was overwhelming trade union support for this. The guys who are in the front line, whose lives are literally at risk, and whose careers also depend on the creation of opportunities. I take great encouragement and comfort from that, because I believe that the evidence is quite clear. As Councillor Ward pointed out, there are items of equipment and technological systems that we simply could not begin to afford if we were trying to go it alone irresponsibly as just the Isle of Wight Fire Service. Being part of a bigger operation will give our fire officers greater opportunities to progress their careers, and indeed for us to attract people with particular skills from the mainland. We've already talked about how we buy into, effectively, very high quality senior management because we are sharing the cost of that with Hampshire. We should be building on that, not just for management, but also for many of the technical and specialist skills that our brave firefighters need to have available at some place within the organisation, even if it's a skill or an experience or a piece of equipment that is seldom used. Wouldn't it be nice if none of our firefighting equipment was ever used? But we have to know that if we need it, we can get it. And certainly we could not afford the quality of the equipment and the need there is to continually renew it over time. So I think this is a no-brainer of a proposal. It must go to Cabinet anyway, and so I hope Cabinet will absolutely back this proposal. in the interests of the residents of the island and the safety of our firefighters.
Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you. Yes, I was at the scrutiny, took part in that debate back in June, and the recommendation was that we wait before we went to the consultation until we had the results of the inspector's report and colours. And, you know, maybe a very simplistic view, but, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, is where I sort of start always with these things. And again, if you look at the law centre sort of correlation, you know, there's such a specialist service, such great outcomes, that local knowledge, you know, I find it very difficult why we're sort of going down this road. Yes, we've got one hand behind the back because of the Police Crime Commissioner, the legislation that goes with that. But I just wonder, you know, if we had the extra money from government, the £6 million we're short each year, would we really be considering this? Would we still be considering it? We seem to be being forced down this road of ever more divesting ourselves of services and dressing it up like it's a really good thing. You know, it's going to be better. It's not always better. Thank you.
Councillor Love.
Thank you. I'm looking at this from a slightly different angle. I would be quite supportive of a Isle of Wight and Hampshire fire service because it's about not playing second fiddle, given that our fire service is award-winning and we have high-quality members of staff and management here, which puts us above, instead of playing the second fiddle to Hampshire and investing into our technology advances that we're investing here, you know, fibre and so on, and reversing that round and saying, yeah, I'm happy for that, for them to learn from our award-winning fire service to invest into our managers and it be administered from the island sounds a great idea to me, rather than this territorial bit, which is about, you know, giving everything away. So I could support that kind of idea, but I always hear that the Isle of Wight is the second part of the argument.
Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to say, firstly, that I am very appreciative of the very hard work that Councillor Outlaw has put into this. He has taken on his portfolio with verve and dedication, and he really has put hard work into this. However, I still do have some concerns, and I do agree with Councillor Jones-Evans that it feels as if we are still being pushed down this route. Both Councillor Abraham and Councillor Whitehouse mentioned the Fire Brigades Union. Well, with Councillor Jones-Evans, I've also been very involved in scrutiny on this issue, and I have visited fire stations, I've spoken to firefighters from more than one station to try, and I have spoken to representatives of the FBU. And it feels to me that, yes, it's fair to say that they are looking at adopting this combined authority as a better of two options, rather than going down the road of becoming under the Police and Crime Commissioner. Now, either way, it has to go to the Secretary of State, but the Secretary of State does have the power to appoint the Police and Crime Commissioner. At the moment, he is saying that he doesn't want to take that over, and perhaps with a combined fire authority, he would be less likely to want to take over our Isle of Wight service. And I think that is more the thrust of the FBU argument. The other thing that does concern me is the governance of the new combined fire authority would be on proportionality. So how much of a voice would we realistically have as the Isle of Wight? And lastly, I'd just like to say this is so much more than just about fighting fires. This is about all the services that our firefighters provide on the island to an incredibly high standard. And I do have my reservations with this. Thank you.
Councillor Churchman.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a little bit of history. As Councillor Abraham said, when the original control room was moved to Reigate in Surrey, you know, we were all going to go to hell in a handcart because they wouldn't know where we were. And when Councillor P.C. Wilcox, myself and Councillor Ward went to look at Reigate, as Councillor Ward has already said, we were absolutely flabbergasted at the up-to-date technology. In fact, the Isle of Wight Council Fire Authority, the IT was so bad, we had to renew it and we didn't really have the money. And the government did give us, I think it was £1 million at the time, to combine. So it was a joint thing. But we're not the Isle of Man. We will never be autonomous. I think we're placing too much of our own political aspirations on firefighters. Firefighters are dedicated professionals, the same as nurses are. They will do what they are trained to do, which is go and fight fires, whether it's under a combined authority or under the Isle of Wight. So let's put our political ideas onto the fire service. To me, it makes sense. It is a combined authority. It's not one is going to be ruling the others. Dorset and Wiltshire have combined. It's partly because it makes sense with training and equipment, but also money has a lot to do with it. I can only support this because I can see the advantages of the technology and the direction that will come from other authorities.
Councillor Brodie.
All right, thank you, Chair. It strikes me that the way this council's going, I think Reg referred to as becoming a borough council. In actual fact, I don't think there'll be anything for this council to do as town and parish councils are picking up all the borough services. Newport and Ryde are effectively mini borough councils now because the Isle of Wight Council shed services. Some people may think that's a good idea, but if you're dreaming of County Hall being the Isle of Wight borough, you might have to think about that. Moving on to the FBU's been mentioned quite a lot, and I mean they don't support this. They prefer this out of two evils, because there is a big evil, and it's Mr. Lane, the Police and Crime Commissioner. They want nothing to do with him, Mr. Lane. You know, they would rather stay as the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. They know that this all being taken over by the PCC is inevitable, and they're going for the least worst option, so the least worst evil. So let's have no mistake about that. Consultation. I think it's been referred to in this chamber on a number of occasions in the past about the quality of Isle of Wight consultation. We seem to have an attitude that provided we do some sort of consultation, that is good enough. Now, the fire consultation was just like all the others. Hard to find, hard to know about. I'll refer to Barry over there. I mean, Barry is responsible for the Island Planning Strategy consultation at the moment, and I noticed there was a reminder about it this week. But I spent time recently showing people how to access the draft options plan, which you practically need a degree in information technology to understand where it is. And of course, that's the one that everybody wants to see where the housing allocated lands are, etc. It's almost deliberately been designed so that ordinary people cannot access it. And that seems to me just an example of the way this council, and it's not just the Tory administration, the independents were just as bad. And in my 14 years, I've never once seen a good consultation, and it's about time we started to address things like that. Then we might get a few more than 48 or whatever it was people actually responding out of an adult population of what, 112,000 or something like that. I mean, it's pretty damn poor. To move on, let's just remind ourselves, Michael was actually wrong. He said there were 58 full-time. There are actually only 50 as a result of the disgraceful reorganisation you pushed through earlier last year, which saw the moving of the cabinet portfolio from Councillor Peace on to Councillor Outlaw. And finally, can I just remind you that this report refers to, this would improve effectiveness. We are a more effective fire and rescue service than Hampshire at the moment, and that there is no problem with recruitment either in our local service. I will be voting against this because I'm an Isle of Wight councillor. I do not believe that our fire and rescue service is in a bad state, and I do think this is done purely and simply for financial reasons. I can tell you what, I can think of a few other ways of saving some of the money, but we'll get around to that next month. Cheers, Chair.
Tig, if you sum up, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll try and be brief and pick up some of the points mentioned, but they might be a little disjointed, so if you can bear with me. I appreciate the comments from Councillor Nicholson with regard to children's services, the CCG, the ambulance service, that have all benefited from working with partners in Hampshire, as has the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service for the last 3 years. But it's worth making absolutely clear to everyone here that this is not a combination between Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. It's a new combined authority. So Hampshire Fire Authority is coming to an end, and this is a combination of 4 different authorities: Hampshire County Council, the Isle of Wight County Council, Portsmouth and Southampton City Councils. I appreciate some of the comments from Councillor Andre. I understand her concerns about the voice that the Isle of Wight community would have within the new combined authority. And may I be absolutely clear, and I think Councillor Garrett touched on this as well, the importance of the governance of the authority, is that we would actually have 11 voices on that authority arguing the case and fighting and ensuring the delivery of improved services within that authority, because every member of that authority is responsible for the fire, the protection of those communities, no matter where they are within the boundaries of that authority. We want what's best for our island community, and I believe this proposal ensures the future resilience of the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. It will still be our service. It will still be islanders who are in the fire service, who know their local community and represent, and many of them work in their local, all the retained firefighters who are working in their local community. They understand it, and it will still be our service. And I'd like finally to just sum up by saying this is right, this protects the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. It gives us the resilience we need going forward. And finally, as we're in the full council, and this is the first opportunity since we've had the report from Her Majesty's Inspector of Fire Services, I wanted to publicly congratulate every member of staff of the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service for the report, which concluded that it was a good service and it keeps our community safe. Thank you.
Okay, we move to the vote now. The name vote, could please indicate that you wish to have a name vote. Okay, thank you very much. All those in favour?
Councillor Abraham, Councillor Bertie, Councillor Beston, Councillor Brading, Councillor Churchman, Councillor Hastings, Councillor Hobart, Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Kilpatrick, Councillor Mosdell, Councillor Merwill, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Outlaw, Councillor Peace, Councillor Perks, Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk, Councillor Tyndall, Councillor Ward, Councillor Whittle, Councillor Whitehouse, Councillor Cameron and Councillor Stewart.
Those against, please.
Councillor Downer, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Howe, Councillor Stevens, Councillor Jones-Evans, Councillor Love, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Barry, Councillor Garrett.
Abstentions, please.
Councillor Andre.
Okay, that is carried. That's 23 for, 10 against and 1 abstention. Right, moving on to 9B, adoption.
Chairman, could I propose that we extend the meeting till 10 o'clock, please?
Can I take a vote, please, on those people willing to extend the meeting till 10 o'clock this evening, please?
We'll have to do that. We've got to.
If we don't get to 10B, we have to come back tomorrow, yes. Or another date, but very soon, yeah. Those in favour, please, we've been requested. That's 26, that's the majority, that's carried. Thank you, that means we will be here till 10 o'clock this evening. Right, moving on to 9B, adoption of the revised policy statement, licensing. This is you again. Councillor Perks.
I'm afraid I missed the declaration of interest, and I should declare an interest in both items B and C and leave the room.
Councillor Outlaw, up to you. Oh. Okay, Councillor Outlaw, please, could you move?
Thank you. Regarding the licensing policy under Section 5 of the Licensing Act 2003, local authorities are required every 5 years to review and, if necessary, amend its policy with respect to licensing functions. The revised policy has been consulted on, which resulted in one reply from Wight Town Council relating to polycarbonate drinking vessels. This was considered, and officers' comments are contained within paragraph 8 of the report. The policy is being updated with additional sections relating to major events and information regarding external areas. I'm satisfied that this revised policy is up to date and provides a good working document for the Council to adopt. I therefore ask the Chamber to adopt the policy. I ask for a seconder and suggest, unless anyone has any other questions, that we move to the vote.
Jones, is that seconded? Thank you. Is everyone happy that we move to the vote? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Oh, wow. Thank you, Chamber. Okay, we move to the vote. All those in favour, please. Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on, sorry, Tig, it's your show tonight, isn't it? Adoption of the revised policy of statement of principles under section 349 of the Gambling Act, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking for a repeat of Part B as well. Under the Gambling Act 2005, local authorities are required every 3 years to review and, if necessary, amend its policy with respect to licensing functions. The revised policy has been consulted on, which resulted in no responses. The policy in front of you today has been updated by officers to include the most recent population numbers for the island and some legislative changes. These are mainly relating to types of licences available. I'm satisfied that the revised policy is up to date and provides a good working document for the Council to adopt. I therefore ask the Chamber to adopt this policy. I ask for a seconder and suggest, unless anyone has any other questions, that we move to the vote.
Is everyone happy that we move to the vote again? Thank you very much. All those in favour of the motion, please. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No, that's carried. Thank you. Move on to item number 10, which is reports of the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Resources. So Stuart Hutchinson will be leading on this pay policy, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope I can keep this trend going. Paper F is the statutory annual requirement to report on the Council's pay policy. It has to go to full Council, hence it is here. The pay policy that we have, general principles of it, have been similar for a number of years. In fact, if you look at previous reports, you'll find it quite difficult to discover the changes. But those few changes that there have been are set out on page F1, paragraphs 2A to H, and also on pages F6 and 7. Otherwise, it is the mixture as before, and I would propose that the Council adopts this policy as it has done in previous years.
Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Whittle. Anyone wishing to speak? Move to the vote. Ooh. Okay, all those in favour, please. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No, that's carried then. 27 or 26, do you say? 27, thank you. Okay, call anyone in that wants to come back in. Right, item 10B is the increase in long-term empty property premiums. This again is you, Councillor Hutchinson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a new power which the government has offered to councils provided they wish to accept it. In many ways, it's a win-win for the council because in respect of long-term empty properties, if landlords or owners do not bring them back into use, we can encourage them to do so by a penalty which is a premium on their council tax, and the longer they leave them empty, the more we are able to increase that premium. So if landlords don't cooperate, then we are able to issue financial penalties. If we have to issue those penalties, that obviously is very effective for the council's finances. However, we would far prefer that empty properties were brought back into use. We average around about 150 to 200 a year, and if we can bring them back into use, then obviously that is a couple of hundred more dwellings available. So in both respects, whether we get the extra houses or whether we get the extra income, provided we accept the government's policy, we can implement that improvement. And I would recommend to Council that we do go for option 2, which is set out in paragraph 29. Is
there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Nicholson. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Judy Jones.
Thank you. Sorry, very quick. No, it's just really, I commend this, and only wish that we could extend this to some of the non-domestic properties that we have on the island. That would really help our regeneration ambitions as well. If we could get them full and working, I think that would be wonderful. But no problem with this paper whatsoever, and we'll support it.
Councillor Lilly.
I totally support this, and the reason why I want to speak really on behalf is in my ward and a lot of other members' wards, you actually on a regular basis see properties. I have 2 properties that were bought for penny feathers that sit as you come into Ryde. So when people are driving into Ryde, they see these fallen down buildings and everything. We need to actually totally support this, because we need to actually, these landowners and property owners who allow these buildings to get into disarray that could give housing to homeless people on this island need to be brought out. So I fully support it, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Anyone else wishing to speak? I move to the vote. All those in favour, please. Anyone against? Any abstentions? 34 in favour, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 11, which is motion submitted under Procedure Rule 9. Councillor Whitehouse, you're first.
Thank you, Chair. You've seen this motion before, and it will come back again. What I wanted to say this evening was just to update members. The leader of the council has asked the deputy leader and myself to undertake a task with officer support of reviewing the constitution and looking at some of the flaws, many of which were exposed this evening when we didn't quite know what we were doing, and to bring forward recommendations to a full council meeting for adoption. Obviously, it's something that only full council can do. I just wanted to reassure members that it will be done in an open, transparent, and not at all political manner. The first job will be to look at those areas of the Constitution that definitely need attention, and then work up proposals. If any member has read the Constitution, as frequently as I have and Councillor Brodie has, and you have areas that you would like us to look at, then do send them through. I'm sure there will be suggestions from officers of things they've encountered in areas outside the council chamber, but obviously as far as Councillor Hutchinson and I are concerned, we'll be mainly looking at the public conduct of the full council meeting and perhaps cabinet and scrutiny as well, to make sure that we have a constitution that is fit for purpose and takes account of technology developments. And if members were to permit me, I'd then just like to defer the motion for consideration so we can not waste any more time on it this evening.
You are deferring the motion. Thank you very much. Moving on. Item number 2 on the motions, Councillor Jeff Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. And it's a shame that we couldn't have dealt with this earlier on. I did try and achieve that. As ever, I use a lot of words, but what I'm more interested in is the very final paragraph of this motion. I think we all know already, I've said enough about it, I think a lot of people have said enough about it, that the service provided by the existing Isle of Wight Law Centre is very specialist. It saves this council a fortune. It is well valued particularly by people at the tough end of society, certainly by people in my ward, many hundreds of whom have been helped by the Law Centre over the last 14 years. And we have this situation where a tender has been advertised to roll up all the information, advice and guidance services into one specification. That is something that is going to be very difficult for something like the Isle of Wight Law Centre, and I dare say the CAB and Age UK to tender for separately. I don't know if it's possible for them to tender for jointly, and I'm just a little concerned that we're just opening the door to mainland organisations like the U Trust to come into the Isle of Wight and take over all of these services, abandoning the well-valued services we've had on the Isle of Wight. Now, I noted earlier on, Councillor Murrell, when we were discussing this before, said it's all about best value, and I would remind people that best value is not just about price. Best value is about the quality of service that you give to residents, and it's absolutely essential that that is taken into account in information, advice and guidance services. The problem that we have with the £250,000 refit of the ground floor of this building is that people don't trust County Hall. Now, I don't know why that is. I'm sure they would trust it if I was the de facto Prime Minister of the Isle of Wight, but they clearly don't need to trust Dave, and they never trusted Ian, you know, but clearly it would be if I was there. But all I'm trying to do here, I don't really want to get into a great wrangle about it. Chris has put an amendment in, which I don't think is massively contradictory to what I want to do, and I don't really think he needs it, because I'm not looking for this practice to become closed, opaque or illegal. I'm certainly not looking for that at all. What I'm looking for is for us just to revisit the tender that we're advertising for the specialist services that I've outlined in paragraph 2 of this motion that are provided by the Isle of Wight Law Centre, so that people who provide those services can tender for them, rather than having to provide all the other panoply of advice services that are suggested by the current advert. Now, I'm not sure where the decision was made. As I say, I think there was a report at Cabinet a year and a half ago. I didn't get a chance to look at it before tonight. But I'm not quite sure where this has originated from, because I would suggest to you, Councillor Stewart, that, you know, as an Isle of Wighter, you know, you would be wanting to make sure that the people of the Isle of Wight got the right advice services, rather than just money-saving ones. The quality is important. I hope we can take out the first 3 paragraphs. I delete them all. I'm proposing the last paragraph. It says, resolves to urge the administration to undertake a separate tendering process for the specialist services currently provided by the Isle of Wight Law Centre, and key words, and I thank the monitoring officer for this, open to all relevant providers. I hope you'll support this, and I'll look for a seconder. Thank you.
Awesome.
Councillor Merwell.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, hopefully Councillor Brodie will listen to me next time. I didn't say it was just a price issue. It is quality. We do look at the whole picture. Also, organisations can look at putting a joint tender together, which often happens because they don't have all the expertise in one organisation. So 2 or 3 can put one tender together. Thank you.
Councillor Mosden.
Can I just clarify that Isle Help is already made up of Age UK and Citizens Advice? One of the reasons that we did what we did at County Hall was actually help Citizens Advice survive, so that they wouldn't have the worries of expensive leases and stuff like that, and they could come into County Hall so they could provide a better service for our island community. Having been downstairs and spoken to people that are coming in and using the service, it actually is really, really appreciated, and it's members of Citizens Advice that are meeting and greeting people when they come in. So I just needed to clarify that.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Yes, Chairman, as anticipated, I do want to move the amendment that I circulated in advance to delete paragraphs 1, 2 and 3, as Councillor Brodie said he's willing to do anyway, and in paragraph 4 delete undertake. Do we have the wording coming up on the slide, or do I need to read it? Oh, okay. well, you've all seen the wording that I circulated earlier, but it was to delete undertake to end and replace with ensure that its procurement practices are open, transparent and lawful, delivering value for money for islanders and ensuring that the necessary range of legal and other advice is available to those who have access to it currently through the Law Centre and other providers. I would want to echo what Councillor Brodie said. There is absolutely no doubt that the service that is provided at the moment by the Law Centre is highly valued. And I'm reassured by what Councillor Merwill said. I just realised you didn't ask for a seconder for my motion, Chair.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that amendment?
Right, thank you. I didn't want to fall foul of the rules. And I'm reassured by what Councillor Merwill said about taking into account the quality of the service. So let's be absolutely clear what is not happening. Services are not being cut in this particular area. All that is being done is that proper due process is being followed in order to ensure that the islanders are in fact getting the services that they need, provided from quality providers who understand the island's issues and dynamics. And I'm sure that will be thoroughly looked at by Councillor Merwill, just as he has done with other contracts that he's looked at on behalf of the authority. I don't want to speak at any great length. We did have a debate earlier on the petition. The amendment has been moved and seconded, and I leave my fate in the hands of the Chair.
Councillor Lilly, did you wish to speak?
I wish to speak, obviously, on the motion.
Speaking to the amendment now, though.
Are we on the amendment? But can I, as a seconder of the motion, am I able to still speak on the motion? Later. Okay. I will reserve the right to speak later. Okay.
Discuss the amendment. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the amendment? Right, we've got printed copies.
Unfortunately, for some reason, the link is failing. It has been prepared, but actually trying to use it, I'm afraid it's failed. We'll have to look at why.
Councillor Barry, do you wish to speak to the amendment? Thank you. Quiet, please.
Why would
Chair,
go on.
Chair, you know, well, I was sent an amendment I was sent a list of amendments from Councillor Whitehouse. Councillor Amendment, I'm going to start calling you Chris. I'm pretty nobody else in your group does anything on this regard. I was sent an amendment, which actually wasn't, and then we were sent. This would leave the motion reading, which didn't actually reflect what the amendment said. And I would have thought that would have been checked. It said delete everything from undertake in the final paragraph of my motion, and then it said, this would leave the motion reading council resolves to continue to ensure. It didn't reflect what the amendment said. Now, I was going to raise that tonight anyway, but I would have thought that would have been thoroughly looked at by Democratic Services before being issued, I think it was last Thursday or Friday. I'm getting increasingly concerned, and it's not the fault of hard-pressed junior staff of this council. I'm getting increasingly concerned at the management of these councils by members of the corporate management team. And I think it's about time we got our act together, because this is getting embarrassing, Dave.
Councillor Barry, you wish to speak to the amendment?
Speaking to the amendment, right? I've got a problem with this. It says to make sure its procurement practices are open, transparent and lawful, delivering value for money. That's the basic of the procurement policy of this council. That suggests that the procurement that carries on within this council is something other than transparent, lawful and delivering value for money. Anybody who puts a tender into this council, it will be looked at and decided on under them basic rules for a start. There are other laws as well, but our procurement is second to none. So why should you vote for something that suggests it's not?
I think, what's his name? Oh, no, it's not. The next one next door. So, I was having a moment then. I just could not remember your name. Are you speaking to the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We need to have the amendment because, as Councillor Barry points out, we have a robust system for acquiring our services, but the original one says we have to give priority to a particular supplier, and so that is actually not acceptable.
Councillor Whitehouse, is that the amendment to the motion? Is that your amendment to the motion? Yeah. It is. Oh, that's different to what I've thought as well then. Councillor Judy Jones-Evans.
Thank you. I think it's well worth remembering what Councillor Barry said earlier on in this evening, and I too did audit, Chairman, and sat for many meetings there, and we often asked about the waivers, and we drilled officers on the reasons behind the waivers. And yeah, quite sometimes it was they'd run out of time and hadn't had a chance to go out to procurement again, and hadn't a chance, and so for order for the contract to keep running and the service to be provided, then the waiver was given. But quite often, and again at Newport and Carrisbrook Parish Council, if there's a specialist provider, we don't actually have to go down that procurement, because it's such a vital service that can only be provided by that one particular firm. And I think with having a strike rate of 98%, the Law Centre can't fall into that bracket. And the amount of money it's saved the council, I don't see the point of this whole procurement unless it's just to save money. But to me, that could be a false economy by people ending up homeless. And as we heard from the petitioner earlier, on the Isle of Wight Council's books. It just makes no sense whatsoever. Let's look at our waivers. Thank you.
Councillor Merwell, did you want to speak to the amendment?
Just commenting on what's just been said. Over the years, there have been a lot of waivers. That's one thing that we're going away from. Millions of pounds have been lost by previous administrations because the lazy way is to, no, let's just waiver, let's just use the same person or the same organisation. That won't happen with this administration.
Councillor had their hand up to speak. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the amendment, just a couple of points. Councillor Brody made the comment, I don't align with the phrase junior members of staff. I don't think it felt a bit derogatory. I don't think we need to talk about it. I understand the principle that you were making, which is it should be down to...
Clarification, Chair.
Yeah. Finish speaking. Okay. Finish speaking.
The second point can only be provided by, I can tell you now, I don't know that the Law Centre is the only body that can provide this. I've heard it said by many people. That doesn't mean I don't believe it, but actually No, I'm sorry, I'm not saying you did. It's what's been commented on, and it's in the comments that we've heard on the petition as well. What the council should be doing, I think Councillor Moore has echoed it, it's our job on behalf of the taxpayers of the Isle of Wight to make sure that we get the best value in terms of money, but also that we're getting the best value in terms of the service delivery. I've heard no evidence to the contrary. I've heard a lot of compliments about the Law Centre. Personally, I'm disappointed that I understand they didn't want to come into County Hall, although you've given an explanation for that. And for the people that I speak to, and I regularly now go through County Hall and speak to the reception, the people that are there, it's an extremely good facility, and it disappoints me that anybody on the island should feel that they can't come there and get service and support. But I can understand the point you make. So I think for me, all I'm saying is, I think in general terms, the amendment that Councillor Whitehouse has sought to put is to reassure people that we're following a procurement process. It doesn't exclude the Law Centre. It just means if they can't make certain areas, as has been pointed out, they can seek other areas to cover that. And we're not cutting anything, but this motion is trying to give it a very fair and balanced, the amendment, a very fair and balanced approach, and I'm happy to support it on that basis.
Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Shortest speech in history. The problem I have with this amendment is it seems to be trying to do the same thing as the motion is already achieving. And in that sense, I find it's a mischievous amendment in that it is not ultimately getting to the heart of a subject, which has been outlined by Councillors Brody and others, that there are specialist services needed by people on this island. And you know what? I don't think those people who need those services really care about the wording that is exactly before us tonight. What they really want to know is that we are going to support them in the way that we used to. Now, I fear that the amendment is sending a message that somehow we are not going to do that. Perception is a very damaging thing, and this council is being perceived more and more through amendments to motions, unfortunately, and there is a case for a constitutional review across party, I believe, to find out how we can best take forward our debates here, though I will work with whatever the Constitution provides on the review of the Constitution, being very familiar with it as well. Ultimately, do we or do we not believe that there is a specialist service necessary? Does Councillor Brody's motion already capture that? Was the mood of the meeting earlier when we received the petition aligned across this chamber? Yes, it was. What is this purpose of this amendment? I ask Councillor Whitehouse, are you willing, in good grace, to withdraw your amendment, to accept, yes, we could argue about angels on pinheads, but ultimately the better message, and I hope you are willing to withdraw the amendment, the better message is sent by sending this motion through unanimously and unamended.
Councillor Mosdale speaking to the amendment.
Sorry, my understanding in the procurement process is that whoever replies to this tender has to be provided all the services that are part of that tender. So that means if nobody can provide those services, nobody will actually be part of the procurement process. If we go out to procurement, nobody can fill those services, nobody will actually put a tender document in. So we'll be proven, won't we, if those specialist services can be provided, if nobody actually sends a tender in as part of the procurement process. That's right, isn't it? So if go out to procurement,
right, okay. Right, it's your right now because no one else wishes to speak to the amendment, so it's your right to come back as the original proposer. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I sometimes wonder why I bother. You know, and yet there's probably 25 people in this room probably think the same thing. But I genuinely do try to engage with this Conservative council. And I'm absolutely straight about that. I know that you have to go through a procurement process. I understand that absolutely. I'm not with, you know, Save the Law Centre sort of person. I think they do a great job, but I want to make sure that the council taxpayer gets best value for their pound. But I think the way in which the specification has been drawn up for this tender is flawed in the extreme, Michael. You disagree with me? I think it's flawed. You're the executive member. That's the undemocratic system that we work in this executive model of local government. I think that's flawed in the extreme. I think it's going to penalise those organisations that have operated on the island, effectively many of them, certainly the Law Centre, for a long period of time. And I keep telling you, there are predator organisations out there who are desperate to get here, to bring their stuff here and see our people lost. Now, I'm an Isle of Wight councillor, and I'm proud to represent the people on the Isle of Wight. It seems to me that the Conservatives increasingly don't want to represent the Isle of Wight and just want us to become a little satellite of Hampshire or of some multinational or major corporation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. We move to the vote on the amendment now, please. Could those people wishing to indicate a named vote, please indicate. Thank you very much. More than 4. Named vote on the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please.
Sorry, Councillor Abraham, Councillor Bertie, Councillor Beston, Councillor Brading, Councillor Churchman, Councillor Hastings, Councillor Hobart, Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Kilpatrick, Councillor Mosdale, Councillor Merwill, Councillor Peace, Councillor Ward, Councillor Whittle, Councillor Whitehouse, Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk, Councillor Tyndall, Councillor Cameron, and Councillor Stewart.
And those against, please.
Councillor Downer, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Stevens, Councillor James Evans, Councillor Love, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Barry, Councillor Garrett.
And are there any abstentions?
Councillor Nicholson. Yeah, so the amendment's accepted. Okay. Then can you put up the next slide?
Okay, that motion's been carried 24-9 and 1 abstention. Now we move to the substantive motion.
I'm trying to put it up. It's not working again.
We're just trying to get it up on the screen.
It is, he just missed the words. Council resolves to continue.
Okay, it's coming up it's coming up actually on Jen's computer, but it's actually not coming up through on these. I don't know. There's obviously, you did see it earlier on. No, no. Yes.
That's okay. So we now need to debate the substantive.
So now we debate the substantive motion. You can.
Well, Conservative members of the Council, well done. You've just passed an indictment of the procurement practices of the Isle of Wight Council during your 20-odd months of tenure of the period prior to 2013, from 2005, when there was also a Conservative administration, and also, Ian, I'm afraid to say, your period as well. You probably didn't know about it at the time, but these experts over here are aware that our procurement practices are closed, opaque, and illegal, and have been for a while. So I hope the media reports that, because Councillor Whitehouse and his Conservative colleagues are redressing these major issues that they've emerged nearly 20-odd months after they took, well, nearly 2 years after they took power in this council chamber. This is a deliberately mischievous amendment to the original motion. It achieves nothing along the lines that I wanted to achieve, and I'm sure many other members will, and I will be opposing this motion. It is a deliberate attempt, as I said earlier, to bring in corporations from the mainland to provide services that people will not use from many communities within County Hall. They will not use them. They will destroy the law centre services, and I hope they're proud of themselves. And I will seek a name vote on that as well. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Two things I would say to Councillor Brody. The spirit of his intention here is understood, and I can assure him that, and I don't need to speak for Councillor Merwell, but I will on this occasion. In my time of dealing with him, he is not somebody who would in any way condone unprofessional and unethical practice in procurement. I'm very reassured that he will look into this. But I think there is a message that we all get sometimes from the public. They think the Isle of Wight Council, without sometimes any evidence, think we tie these things up and we give them through the back door and we all just give them the so-and-so. Well, this is evidence of exactly what we're not going to do here. We're going to be open, transparent and fair. I have heard no detrimental comments about the Law Centre. I've not visited it. I understand what it does. If it does what everybody says, I would expect the Law Centre, as with any other applicant, to have a fair and transparent opportunity here, and I would encourage them to put forward on that basis. I would also be very happy to talk to you if you've got any evidence at all that says that we are doing anything which is other than that, because on my watch, I wouldn't condone that whatsoever. We've brought this now, it's the motion. The Law Centre and others will know how they can follow the process, and as provided they do that, then it will be a very even and fair approach.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chair. I have three things that I would say. First of all, Codswall up from Councillor Brody. The motion that now reads that the Council resolves to continue to ensure that its procurement practices are open, transparent and lawful. So making it quite clear that that's what we're trying to do already. The second point that I would make is that this motion actually helps the Law Centre, because by the virtue of the campaign that its spokespersons have been running, it would be very difficult for this council to have gone ahead and awarded them any contract if they had continued and we hadn't made quite clear our commitment to impartiality, openness and transparency. Because we must to campaigns just because they shout. The test has got to be, what do the islanders best need and how do we meet that need for them? So it's absolutely necessary in order for the Law Centre to remain in the tendering process that we make this point clear, otherwise we could be open to legal or judicial review challenge or to the Ombudsman. The final thing that I want to say to Councillor Brodie is he complained that he tried to engage with the Conservative administration. That is, on this issue, completely untrue. The reason I say that, as I made quite clear at the last full council meeting, if members want to put motions down and expect the majority group to support them and not to challenge them, then they should have the common sense and the common courtesy, was the phrase I used, to speak to the leader, the lead member and myself, so that we can get these things sorted, as I believe we have done with Councillor Lilly in relation to his motion.
I'm sure Councillor Stewart will confirm again. I shared my proposal with him on the 31st of December 2018, and he acknowledged it, said he would discuss with the group. I expect to hear further the next I knew with this amendment. So I would ask Councillor Wight to retract that accusation that I lied. Thank you very much.
With respect, Chair, I never used the word lied in relation to any member in my life, so I do require that Councillor Lumley withdraws that unfounded allegation. In regard to his conversation, on my point of clarification, he's asked me a question. My group leader has indicated that Councillor Lumley did indeed speak to him. It was my amendment. At no point did he speak to me about it. I circulated it in advance to all members that I do not need to do under the Constitution. Indeed, I could have come along on the evening and moved it then constitutionally. Thank you. On a point of personal clarification, Chair.
Councillor Stewart.
Well, it's an irony that both members are correct. I can confirm that Councillor Brodie sent to me an email explaining an outline of what his motion was going to be, and hoped that when I discussed it with the group they would agree. That was the email. We didn't have, however, a written discussion about it, which is the point I think what Councillor Whitehouse is aware of, because he has been looking at all the motions this evening, as members will know. So I'm grateful for the cooperation that Councillor Brodie is starting to show from our point of view, and we certainly welcome that. But it is a point. I don't accept the other comment that was made, however, that, I think the exact phrase, but Councillor Judy Jones-Evans thinks it's a some sort of control thing. I've always made very clear the fact of life is, for everybody, that the majority of this administration now sits with the Conservative group. We are keen to support motions which are adding value to the island services. If we don't know about them and can't discuss them, the only option we get, and there are a couple that were here, is to actually try and deal with it by the time it's already in the public domain. I'm keen that we have that cooperation. We're not going to tell anybody, and indeed we don't have the power to tell anybody on either side how to put a motion in, but I think discussion between us prior to full council meetings would enable us all to act in the best interest of the island. Different people have a different view. That's my view.
Okay, right. I've got a number of people wishing to speak, so I'm going to go through them. Councillor Barry, you're next.
I don't know whether I'm the only one who's noticed this, but that seems to change as the more he says. Councillor, what's his name? Whitehouse. Councillor Whitehouse says that changes up there as he's talking. Yeah, but we're just going to wait a minute. We're just going to vote on the amendment, and now we're voting on a revised motion.
It's been changed while we're.
But you haven't revised it, have you? It's
no.
your motion.
Oh, this is a new trick.
Your motion. So how can they revise his motion?
What is happening to this council?
We're voting on the
Chair,
amendment.
what are officers doing?
That is the amendment.
This
no,
is
listen,
a disgrace.
the amendment, no, listen, what he's saying is that continues to be transparent and open. It don't mention continue there, yet he's arguing and calling into task and saying we're saying it's continued, but it doesn't say continue. Well, I would, yeah, come on, then let's tell him. But
Right. The original motion started with the words, Council resolves to urge the administration. Thereafter, the following words were deleted and replaced by the amendment that has now been adopted. The original slide that was up that said the Council... sorry, now mislaid that word. So, the wording that Council resolves to continue is wrong. Councillor Brodie himself pointed out that actually the wording that we had put up as a substantive motion wasn't accurate. That now reflects the original substantive with the amendment made to it.
the amendment we voted on.
Councillor Barry, the amendment was delete paragraphs 1, 2 and 3, and in paragraph 4, delete undertake. Undertake wasn't the first word, and then add additional words. But the original words of the substantive remain.
Point of information. As you're aware, Chair, earlier today, at the initiative, don't shake your head, Chief Executive, please. At the initiative of Councillor Jones-Evans, there was a group leaders meeting to discuss the very concerns about these amendments that opposition members had. Attended, as I wasn't there, attended, as I understand, by Councillor Jones-Evans, Councillor Stewart, Councillor Garrett, Councillor Lilly. I don't know if Councillor, were you there, Ian? No. So, where I was explained, and this was all these problems were just ignored by the officers and the leadership of this council, as per usual. That was an initiative, a good initiative, by Councillor Jones-Evans, who's not in the business, like perhaps I could be accused of causing a few ructions occasionally, and she was just dismissed. And I think that's just representative of what's happening on this council.
I think, sorry, I feel that the original proposal, the whole point of going back to the petition of the Law Centre is that there are local organisations that have become indigenous. The Law Centre movement across the UK came from initiatives of lawyers giving initially pro bono support and developed, and they very much came up. And I think, of course, the council has to go through procurement processes and processes. I worked in the voluntary sector for nearly 30, 40 years and had to go through the tender process. They are there, the rules are actually there. The dangers, which actually been mentioned, that I would ask the Cabinet to be conscious of, is that local indigenous expertise that have the trust of local people do become under threat by very large lawyer-based companies. I have seen them in places like the West Midlands where they've actually destroyed a lot of small indigenous community grassroots organisations. And all we're asking is to be careful of that, because those companies will come in and then they will go out. And then you've killed off all that indigenous year by year support, and that's the only thing that we're actually trying to say.
I help the chair on that particular point, because the monitoring officer is absolutely correct. The amendment that we voted on was the one that I read out. There have been a couple of different versions, I don't know where all the versions have come from, that contained a typing error. But that's what I read out, and that's what we voted on. That's now the substantive motion.
All those in favour of this revised motion? No, we're moving to vote. Oh, right. Name vote, because we did that earlier. We indicated earlier, yeah? Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's fine. Name vote. You asked for it earlier. That's fine. Okay? Right, name vote.
Councillor Abraham, Councillor Bertie, Councillor Beston, Councillor Brading, Councillor Churchman, Councillor Hastings, Councillor Hobart, Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Kilpatrick, Councillor Mosdow, Councillor Merwill, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Peace, Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk, Councillor Tyndall, Councillor Ward, Councillor Whittle, Councillor Whitehouse, Councillor Cameron and Councillor Stewart.
And those against, please.
Councillor Fuller, Councillor Jones-Evans, Councillor Love, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Barry, Councillor Garrett.
And abstentions, please.
Councillor Downer, Councillor Stevens.
That motion is carried. Next item is Councillor Debbie Andre. Oh, she's not Debbie. Sorry, it's yours. Thank you. Good luck with all of that.
Thank you, Chair. Am I to believe that there is an amendment on my motion?
Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. I've brought this motion forward. I'd like to make clear not to discredit the work that has been done by the administration and our MP in getting, I think it's unprecedented, recognition for the Isle of Wight as being uniquely isolated. But I don't feel that this actually goes far enough. So I am looking for a seconder for my motion. Thank you.
Councillor Downer, thank you. And Councillor Whitehouse.
I can hear him. Oh, we can start the time again then, and I don't really care if it's Right. Where were we before I was so rudely interrupted? Isolated, yes. This is historic statement because before the government can give us any money to help alleviate the additional costs of being an island, it has to accept that in principle there are such things as additional costs. We then now move to phase 2 of the debate, which is to quantify and agree with the department what those costs are so that they can be met in the outcome of the final funding formula, which is used to calculate the amount of money awarded to local authorities all around the country. So that is a huge and historic step forward. I know the previous island MP spent many years lobbying for recognition of island status. It's only really very recently that we've had this breakthrough due to a sustained and constructive dialogue with ministers of government who are constructive and sympathetic and also conservative and are very happy to talk to us and the island MP. We hope that this will help ensure that we can maintain the level of public services that we have done in the past in order best to meet the needs of the island residents. So on that note, I think I've said enough, and I will hand back to the Chair.
Can I have a seconder for the amendment, please? Councillor Stewart.
Chair, I'll second this motion, and in so doing, I want to try and rise above the feeling in the room of, you know, we're going through this process. Actually, this is a really important point, and I do thank Councillor Andre for raising this, because in the original motion, which has now been expanded to give people a clear picture of what we're talking about, it is important that whenever any of us get to speak to members of government or other contacts that we've got, that we keep the foot on the pedal here. We have achieved something so far which has not been achieved before. We have got government to put into writing a specific reference to the Isle of Wight and the recognition that the cost of travelling across that Solent has a significant impact on this island. This comes from the Portsmouth University work which the government have gone to Portsmouth and verified. That's excellent for us, because the question we now ask government is, given that you've put it in a public document, given that you've recognised that this island is significantly disadvantaged, we now look to you in the funding review comments in December to put that into a practical form. Now, it's a good thing to have achieved, and we do have to recognise the MP has played a role. I've spoken to him at length on this. I know who he's spoken to. The officers have played a role because they've worked hard behind the scenes. And I think what Debbie has done, and I am grateful to Debbie and Chris has tried to do, is highlight this is a big step for us. What we've now got to do is turn it into financial recognition. If we can do that, from our point of view, and we're all about to go through the budget process, it's going to be painful this month. This will enable us to step up a level and say we can start to stand on our own 2 feet. So I'm grateful to both Chris and Debbie for highlighting this. And I think rather than get embroiled in, you said what does what, I'd like to see everybody here support this now and give us the mandate to say to government, the Isle of Wight Council is full on this one. So thank you to both.
Councillor Andre, are you accepting the amendment?
Yes, Chair, I would accept the amendment.
Excellent. And is the seconder, Rodney, are you happy with that? Thank you very much.
Move to vote. Can we move to vote?
Move to the vote? Everyone's happy to move to the vote? Yes? Right, no, Reg wants to speak.
A bit quickly. I think you do a lot better. You talk about all these meetings you have, but it's always one-party meetings. You're trying to get the message across that the whole of the Isle of Wight Council is behind you and everything's lovely, but every time you go up there, I don't know how many times you've been up there, but it's always the Tories who go up there. You don't do all-party deputations to Parliament, and I think you should. When we were in control, we always took all parties with us, and we had some really big successes, especially with area cost adjustment, which Nick Rainsford granted us. It gave us millions extra, a lot more than what you're fiddling about with.
Okay, Councillor Andre has accepted, and the seconder has also accepted the amendment, and we've been asked to move to the vote, so I'm now moving to the vote. All those in favour of the revised motion, please. Anyone against? Any amendments?
Abstentions.
Abstentions? Whatever. That shows you I'm really tired. Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. I know that Councillor Brodie was going to withdraw his next motion anyway, and Councillor Brodie's left, so he's withdrawn his motion, so that's the end of that. So I'm now moving on to Councillor Michael Lilly, and the final one, we've got about 8 minutes.
Well, it's very sad that the issue of child poverty on this island is stuffed in the last 8 minutes of this council because of the various wranglings of old-time councillors within that. So I'm pretty annoyed by it. What I will do is to thank the work of Councillor Brodie, so I apologise, Councillor Brodie and I, that have actually worked together directly, right, without third parties, to actually come to an agreement about the urgent need to look at getting the cabinet member and the officers to look at how we can be more ambitious about reducing child poverty on this island. The fact is, there are two sets of figures. There's a figure of about 7,500 from the end of poverty campaign, and then there's a figure that's come through public health, which is about around about 5,000, which is about 20.7%. Both of those figures have risen significantly from 2016. That is not acceptable. What this would say is child poverty on the Isle of Wight is not acceptable. It's unacceptable, and we need to be very ambitious to move it down. I haven't put figures in it. We agreed. I wanted it to go to 10%, but I was going to leave it to the Cabinet to actually discuss how we can do. Because if you look at the current thing in the court plan of 16, going from 20 to 16 in 8 years, that's only 200 children. That's actually not actually ambitious enough. We should be getting that. I go regularly into the food bank in Ryde. The Isle of Wight Food Bank in the last 6 months has reported a huge increase. Nearly, and there's been about 2,000 sort of emergency crisis. 800 of those have been with children. 800 that have been in desperate thing. And the last thing, because I want to move this on, is I was talking about citizenship today in Ryde Academy with a group of young people, and they wanted to know what I did as a counsellor. So I gave them the agenda and said, this is what I'm doing tonight, and one of the last items is about child poverty that I'm pushing forward. And we had a vote, and 100% of those children said, can you tonight vote for this motion, right? Because it's about our lives, and we want all our peers not to be in a position of actually coming to school without food and actually going back into a situation where we barely might not have a meal. Please vote for this motion and be ambitious.
Of course. 2 minutes. Firstly, like Michael, I am disappointed this is so far down the agenda. It's a real important issue. I'm very grateful to Michael for raising the motion. Also, this shows how it can work, because Michael and I have had conversations about the wording of the motion, and we've come to an agreement on the correct wording for the motion to avoid all the showboating that goes on here and has done this evening. Being political, I am horrified that the leader of the opposition is not here. You know, this is a vital issue, and he has chosen not to be party to the chamber this evening. I find that absolutely horrifying. And others as well, but especially the leader of the opposition, and that's my political bit. The purpose of the motion is to highlight child poverty. It's in our corporate plan. It's one of our key objectives that Sue Crocker and I have agreed. and it will stay in the corporate plans. It's a vital issue. Regarding numbers, I'm used to working in an environment where we always had, I've lived through targets all my life. The target to me has got to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant and timely. Now it's all of that, but the whole idea of a target is achievable, and the figures we put in there is achievable, but the target is there to be overachieved. And you know, I'd love to be 0%. I'd love to have no child poverty, and that would be the aim of anyone. But the realistic target is the numbers we've got in our motion. Councillor Lee's accepted that, and I'll be absolutely horrified if anyone votes against dealing with child poverty on our island, because it's a key issue, and I'm grateful that people have stayed in the chamber so late this evening to discuss this vital issue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I shall be brief. I just wanted to, first of all, thank Councillor Lilly for bringing this forward and for entering into a constructive dialogue with the lead member. Between them, they've come up with a splendid amendment, and I'm delighted that they both liked it. I think we've had 3 motions tonight. Whilst people might remember the rancour on the first one, both the other 2 were calmly agreed because they were factually correct and on message. That's where we want to be with these motions, not grandstanding like the member did on the first one, trying to score cheap political points. But child poverty is without doubt a huge challenge for this island. I just want to point out why there are 2 different sets of figures. The first set of figures are the ones now in the motion, which are taken from our corporate plan. That's what the Island Conservative Administration is already committed to do. The other set of figures that were in an earlier draft of Councillor Lilly's motion were in fact taken from, as he said, the End of Poverty campaign. If you actually look at the definition of child poverty in that definition, it is flawed, because it's measured as a percentage of average incomes.
Councillor Whitehouse, I'm going to have to interrupt you, because if we don't take the vote now, we cannot take the vote. It has to be before 10 o'clock. So, request for everybody to move to the vote, please.
Can't we sit for another hour? Oh, could we name it? Then we can show it.
Is there anyone against? Any abstentions? That's carried. 8 in favour. Thank you very much.
We've got 6 minutes left.
How about members' questions? I've got one. Can we go home?
We've got 6 minutes left. That clock's flashed. Oh, 2 minutes. Something's wrong. Either that's wrong or that's wrong.
No, look, this is on.
Yeah. Oh, so that's right. Mine said like 21:58.
Right, okay, excuse me. Chamber, we've only got 2 minutes to left, so we're not going to go into the the leader's questions. They will be answered. They will be written answers. Thank you, everybody, for your endurance this evening. That's 4 hours of our lives we'll never get back. Let's hope it was productive. Thank you very much.